We're going to call the meeting to order. It's 7:01. Just as I always say, this is a meeting of the Drum Point Property Owners Association Board of Directors. Robert's Rules of Order govern this meeting. Please don't speak until you're recognized by the chair. And as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. I'm going to start off by giving a dissertation. And I'm sorry, but I think we need to do this. I want to talk about the course we set over about a year and a half ago to change our revenue streams and how we support ourselves. And just to give everybody a reminder and make sure we're all on the same page. And if you have questions, please interrupt me and ask. So, back then, the first thing, we came up with a 3-step plan. The plan was to, number one, do away with the voluntary dues and replace them with a mandatory assessment. And that mandatory assessment has been implemented, as you all know. But I'll point out that that position is supported in 2 ways. One is supported through the covenants because we're grantors of the covenants, and we are, as such, can levy fees and assessments. And the second one is through the bylaws, which in section 4, paragraph 2, any change that's voted on and approved through the budgeting process becomes fact. And that has been done for the mandatory assessment. So that's done and off the table. The mandatory assessment is very defendable and appropriate.
It's been done for this year.
It's done. This last fiscal year, it was implemented. This fiscal year coming up in the billing to go out in February, we voted on and approved adjusting the covenant fee to the Department of Labor Statistics CPI calculator number based on the starting year of 1948 and raising the covenant fees to that number, which today is only $98. It went down $1. I'm guessing because gasoline prices dropped. I don't know. And that, of course, is supported by the covenants in Article 4, paragraph 2, which the covenants.
Covenants don't have articles.
I'm sorry, you're right. It's
The bylaws.
paragraph 9. I was reading from the wrong line. Thank you, Max. It's paragraph 9 in the covenants, which say $10 or like amount. Like amount is CPI. So that's what we've already voted on. We're going to do that. It'll go out in the next billing. So, RIA will look at the CPI and figure out what that number is, probably, I guess, the 1st of February, before we send the bill out, or before we prepare the bills. And that's what we'll be going with. That, I suspect that number may change every year. In fact, I'm fairly certain it will. I was surprised to look at it and find that it had changed in the last month. Went down $1.
It went down?
So, yes, Max.
Well, since that's not based on the current year at all anyway, I don't see why it changed, period. It's based on 3 years ago, was the calculation. It's not based upon today or December or any other month of current year.
Well, what it's based on is not really the question. It might explain why it changed, but the calculator is what we're using.
I know, but I don't want to calculate. It's based on old numbers, so I don't know.
Well, the number changes apparently.
It should change every year, but it shouldn't keep changing every month.
Well,
Not the one that's being listed.
interesting that it did change in the last month, which I thought was very
Right.
interesting. So anyway, so we're doing that. And then the third phase of this was to evaluate, and key on the word evaluate, what our ongoing needs from the STD are going to be, and that's going to be a process in itself to decide what that number is going to be. I have some ideas, but I don't even want to bring them out yet because there's going to be a lot of discussion about what that number should be, and then we would put in a request to the county to change the STD amount to that new number for whatever terms we can negotiate with them in terms of time period. I would hope that we don't have to do another 5-year, but if we do, that'll be what it'll be.
What was that?
The STD.
Yeah.
The terms of the STD agreement are based on the agreement,
Yes,
and the agreement has a specific timeline on how long the
Right.
STD will exist.
through,
Well, right now it's a 5-year,
right,
and we weren't served well with a 5-year, and I would suggest that a 5-year is inappropriate. I think a 3-year is more appropriate, but those are things will have to be determined when we work with the county through the STD. This current STD does not expire until June 30th, 2017. So we have time to think about it and come up with a good plan. But we need to start doing that now. So that's a recap of what we're doing with that. Does anybody have any questions about it? I just want to make sure everybody understood it completely. Okay, other than that, I have lots of other stuff, but all of it has to do with roads, so I'll wait for my road committee report to give you that, and let's move on then. Public comment. Is there any public comment from the floor? Very well. The minutes of the last meeting were late getting out, so I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as written.
I so moved.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I so moved.
Moved by
I
Amy.
thought we just did that.
No, that was to accept them, because they didn't get out in time for us to review them.
Accept, approve, okay.
Now we're approving,
I'll second the approval as well.
okay? And again, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed? Sorry I confused you with that. Normally you get these out on Friday, and we don't have to accept them when you do that. Okay.
I managed to eat dinner and to read the minutes before I came in.
Right, right.
I did look at them this afternoon. All right,
Multitask.
next we have Gary's mess of papers. Office update, Rhea?
Yes, okay. First of all, the collections, the progress on the, since I sent the letters out and have begun filing claims, to date, we've collected $5,841 of the money that was in arrears, of $100 and more. Remember, that's what we're working on right now. And my first court dates are coming up January 13th, which is a week from today. We also have our new tax assessments. And just a quick rundown on that, the undeveloped properties overall had a slight decrease in value here and there, $100 here, $100 there. This house had a slight increase, well, an increase of $13,000 for the assessment, for a net change in overall, for all of our properties, of an increase of $9,700.
We should have
in
not
assessed
put a new
value.
refrigerator in here. It's made it more valuable. Sorry.
That's all right. So that's that. And now the other thing, this is a little lengthier. As you're all aware, I use QuickBooks, not only for my accounting, but also to track property owners and properties and so on, and billing. I found, we actually changed from Access to QuickBooks, I think in 2006. Before that, we used Access. I found that because of the way I set up QuickBooks, I cannot always easily generate accurate reports and accounts receivable and so on. And it's because there's an inconsistency in the data. And it's really basically because, it's a little hard to explain, but you as property owners are all up to date with your fees. So you each have 2 entries under your name, as do I. If you're one of these that has back fees from 2003 and prior, I set up a separate category. So now you've got a 3rd line item. If I have filed a small claims case on you, now you have a 4th line item. So when you export that information to Excel to be able to manipulate it, which you should be able to do, you've got all of us with 2 categories under our names, but you've got others with 3 and 4 categories. So there's no consistency. So that's sort of difficult with reports. That's not the main issue though. The other thing is that each transaction that is on your accounts is memorized. So then the following year, all I really need to do is click a couple of buttons and all those transactions reassess to your accounts. But now that, okay, and there are at least 2 transactions per property owner, which is 2,300 memorized transactions. Okay. What QuickBooks will not allow me to do is a global change. In other words, now that we're going to increase the fees, possibly every year, I cannot go in there and change that covenant-free fee this year to $99 like that. I have to go into each of those 23, well, for that it would be 1,100 transactions, covenant fees. No, there's more than that. I'm sorry.
Well, whatever it is.
Because there's 1,600 properties. Some of us own more than one
Right,
property.
right,
So
right.
for each of those properties, I am going to have to go in and change each one from $10 to $100. Next year, if we change the mandatory assessment, the same will hold true for all of those mandatory assessment transactions. And I investigated this last year when I was setting it up. I went online to QuickBooks Help, and I went into the forums, and I also talked with Nora Schweitzer, who was with Toll Griffith. She came here one day and verified what I was doing to say, yeah, it made sense to her and so on. So I called her to see if she knew of a way to make this global change. And no, she did not know of a way, because you cannot export those memorized transactions, make the change, carry it through an Excel database, and then import it. You can't do it. That being said, Access does allow you to do that. And I would like to suggest that we go back to Access for property owner tracking and billing only. It's a relational database, which means I would have a list of property owners, a table, and then a list of fees, a table. So I make that change from $10 to $100. I relate the 2 tables, and the change is made. So.
How will that impact the use of QuickBooks for all the other accounting?
It will only impact it in that when I make a deposit, right now, I download the deposit, but I accept it. Let me see if I can. I have posted your payments to all of your accounts. So now there is an amount, it's on the balance sheet, undeposited funds. So now I'm going to make a deposit. And so what I do is I go into QuickBooks and I click Make Deposits. And that goes to all this list of undeposited funds, and I click those that are going to apply to that deposit. So what happens when I look at those deposits in my account, I can open that and I can see each one of you listed there as part of that deposit. We won't have that anymore. But it's in Access instead. It just simply won't be there in QuickBooks. The deposit will be there because I'll download that from the bank directly, just like I do now.
That's the total deposit.
That's the total deposit.
Which is what we want in QuickBooks anyway.
Correct. So that's really the only.
But you won't have accounts receivable then, because they'll be in Access and not in the QuickBooks.
But right now, I will have accounts receivable. It'll simply be in Access.
Well, I'm saying it won't be in
It won't be in
QuickBooks, so it
QuickBooks.
won't show up on any
Correct.
other reports. You'll have to figure out what
I can do an
accounts
entry.
receivable is.
I can do a
In
journal
Access.
entry. I can do a journal entry to put it onto the balance sheet.
So what I'm hearing is, with using access to track the property owners and the property owners' information, and I'm assuming that if you're gonna build a relational database, you could also track other things in relation to the property owners?
Yes,
Yeah, right.
Like hang tags or
hang tags,
anything that might be common to, okay.
right,
So the database, the access database, relational database would have everything to do with the property owner, including billing and receivables and back dues and all
right,
that.
right,
And Quicken would have all the financials,
QuickBooks, yes,
QuickBooks. I mean,
yes,
I
yes.
use Quicken, so I use,
I know,
it's
that's all,
QuickBooks.
that's-
So, is there a way to move that, the money amount, the amount of monies that are received? How does that get into QuickBooks
I
now?
download that from the bank, because what
Oh, it comes straight from the
it
bank.
comes straight from the bank. I take $5,000 that I've just collected in March or April after the bills are out, and we get all this money in immediately. I go to the bank with a $5,000 deposit, just like I do now, and then I download it to QuickBooks. The only difference is that I'm not accepting the deposit by make deposits, by that method. I'm actually just downloading it. What I do now is I make deposits through QuickBooks, and then when I download it, that downloaded figure actually connects with that thing I've accepted in QuickBooks, and they just sort of merge. There's the deposit, oh look, I see that deposit, says the download, and it's one deposit. So that would be the only difference.
When we separate those, they're gonna have to have some form of double check that the deposits are credited correctly to the property owners.
Correct.
Not that I don't trust you, it's just that mistakes are made.
Right. Well,
So somebody else is gonna have to check, double check.
nobody
those or
checks
something.
it now, though. Nobody checks it now.
But you make a deposit to the bank in that name, and it goes against those records automatically, and so it's tracked specifically.
It would go,
If you collect $5,000 of checks over here,
Mhm.
even if you check them off in Access,
Mhm.
you're gonna make a $5,000 deposit, but there's no surety that it was validated against the people that actually made the payments.
Would it be the
It's-
same
it's-
as doing it in QuickBooks?
yeah,
No,
it's,
because QuickBooks, she makes a deposit in their name, and then it goes through the cycle, it comes
So when you
back.
fill out the deposit slip, you fill out 500
She marks each
deposit
one
slip?
when they pay it,
right,
Well, it wouldn't
I
be
do.
the same in Access though?
but Quicken, how can I say,
Lose
Quicken
it.
accounts for it in the system.
it
There's
does.
no way to lose one. Once she deposits, she says she's making a deposit of that dues for that person, then it goes through the system and it's accounted for. There isn't any other check or balance required. But when you do it separately, it's just like putting all the money in your left pocket and then going to the bank and assuming that everything went out of the
I
right
guess
pocket.
I'm not getting it. It seems to me that when you make the entry in Access, it's the same thing.
Access has no relation to Quicken.
That's true.
It
So
doesn't,
there's no check, there's no balance, there's no check, there's nothing.
I don't see how there's a check and balance in QuickBooks that's any different than doing this.
Because she makes the deposit against the individual name.
he's right in one sense. He's right in one sense.
So
It's done it forever, you should know.
Well, and then, of course, that's the hardship of this, is because she has to do all those one by one.
But I have to do them all one by one in Access or in QuickBooks. It's still,
But for
done or
instance,
not done.
in Access, if you get 55 checks in and you check off say, 55 names, all you end up with is a check, a bank deposit of 55 times
Right,
50.
right.
And that goes forward, I mean, then all you see is, we'll just call it $5,000.
But the
That's all
document,
you see.
Right.
And so the $5,000 shows up in Quicken as income.
So then you simply
Okay,
have
so-
to go to Access to see where that $5,000 applies. It's not that, you don't lose the
All I'm saying is
information.
that there's no double check there to make sure that it was actually done in.
But if it
Access
wasn't
correctly.
done right in QuickBooks, garbage in, garbage out, it would still
Right.
would
Well,
think
but
it
if
was
she
right,
didn't
but it
make a
wouldn't be.
deposit for somebody, then it shows up as no deposit in
And it
Quicken.
would be the same in Access.
Well, maybe she checked the box, but maybe it was the wrong box.
I wouldn't say it's any more error prone than it is right now. I could certainly click off the wrong name in QuickBooks. I don't think that that's enough of a checks and balances, if you will, to warrant, worrying about. I mean, I'm doing it in access. And next year, if I send you a bill and it shows that you didn't pay this year, you're gonna call me. And you're gonna
Well,
say, I have
certainly
check
they are,
number
but-
such and such. I mean, it's not that much of an issue, I wouldn't think, to have to be able to double check it.
Well, but you can go back to Access and check and see where the box is checking
Right.
out, but you can't tell what happened. And Quicken, it had a record of that for the whole year. so
There'll
to
still
speak.
be an accounting, but it will be an access, just like it used to be, just like it used to be.
Well, but we went to QuickBooks to get away from a lot of those things, is all I'm trying to say here.
Right.
Okay.
So that everything we did was within the system and Quicken accounted for all of
I
this.
will say this as well, when Andrew did our, he's the accountant that did our audit, he sat with me for a couple of hours, and I explained to him how we set this up, and because at the time in 2006, we had this voluntary dues, what Enora suggested was that rather than doing invoices, simply to generate statements. So by that happening, what's going on now is that it's not really ticking on accounts receivable until I take a payment. So that's one reason our accounts receivable numbers are inaccurate. They really are inaccurate. And
Well,
I'm just
we're not
realizing that
supposed
because
to
we're
have
delving
accounts
into it
receivables
so
and
much.
payables in the first place because we're on a cash basis.
Well,
So there isn't any receivables except for the imaginary money that we think the county has out there and is gonna pay us. That's the only
we're showing
receivable.
receivables in
I know
our
you're,
balance
but
sheet.
that's wrong, it's just, we don't have receivables.
Well,
Receivables when somebody says they're gonna pay you, but they haven't paid you yet.
correct, correct.
And until you get the payment, then it's a payment.
Right, and then it goes into.
But all you know,
That's
all that tells you is that somebody owes me $1,000,
Right,
that's all that receivables tells you. Same thing for payables, you got the bill,
Right.
now it's payable,
Right.
but you haven't paid it yet.
Well, let's
It's
get
not
back
paid
on,
until it's
let's
paid.
get back on track here.
I think the primary reason for this, though, is that global change. It will take me hours and hours and hours to do every single one of those accounts.
And every year.
And you know, you talk about error prone, I mean,
I agree, we've always
Yeah.
known that was a
right, right,
bad deal, but
right.
we didn't change them very often.
I know we
Amy?
do.
Maria and I discussed this a little bit earlier. Every system you set up has its particular strengths,
Right.
I don't wanna say and weaknesses, but it does.
Mhm.
And the system we had in place was working,
I'm gonna go get that, we have the phone somewhere.
I better wait till we resolve this.
Well, one of the things that we need to know is, what's the cost involved? So we'll get there as well.
Yeah, the other question that I have is, we had identified a problem with some of the entries. Will,
There isn't.
when we were just using QuickBooks,
um,
will this solve that?
Can we just?
What problem with
It's
the
Aubrey?
entries?
Bring that in and set it down.
Hold on a second, Aubrey, I think we can just put you on the conference phone, hold on.
You have Aubrey's phone number?
He's on the phone right now.
Oh, no, oh, okay. All right.
Aubrey, you there? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna set you here, you'll have to listen in. Okay, so,
All right, I think you had called on me.
Amy has the floor.
We could get lost in a lot of detailed pathways, but the fact is, in this discussion, but what you want is you want clear documentation of what's been going on with amounts of money and dates, and you want attribution to the particular property owner. And what we had before was working. However, what we had before was depending on the county and the STD for our major batch of funds. We're now shifting, and we're partly there, to our covenant-supported covenant fees and mandatory assessments as our major source of funds for the long term. And as you pointed out, the mandatory assessment and the covenant fees are subject to change. The combination possibly every year. We thoroughly discussed that. Now, when we go to access, we will have complete documentation which could readily be cross-referenced against QuickBooks for what we need, which is certain totals in QuickBooks. On the other hand, now that the fees that we're charging for mandatory assessments and will be charging for covenants will have increased as of February, both of them. What will happen is we will have more occasion to be filing claims at court because these more properties
Right.
will go over the $100 limit of being in arrears sooner. So that's more detail that you're gonna need, documented and fully sensitively accessible, which you can do in Access.
Right.
And because we're gonna be changing fees in general every year, we just talked about the CPI shifting. I wanna point out to this board that it happened that last year, in order to get our bills out, our invoices out in time, Rhea spent an immense amount of overtime to get that done, going into every single account, an immense amount. It might not be that immense this year because we did a lot of foundational work, but it's still a lot of extra work as long as we lose some information in QuickBooks and you have to go and you can't do it global. So it is clearly, to my mind, with this new way of doing things, time to shift. And since we're going to have documentation fully there in Access, we're not going to lose anything.
No.
Everything could be readily checked by anybody, any auditor, any board member, any community member, if we need to. And therefore, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize Gary to spend up to $1,500 to make this transition. And there's some urgency because we'd like to have the accounts in Access in time for the February mailing. So this is the meeting to start it.
That's Aubrey,
Was he talking to us?
he said.
What'd you say, Aubrey?
I just said that I'd be glad to come down and help with everything.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay,
So I've made a
so we
motion.
have a motion, does anybody want to second it? I'll second it.
Okay, well, the motion includes a specific dollar figure. Do we know what it will cost us to obtain access?
Purchase of Access is about $125. I thought we had it, but we do not. So it's a little bit of an upgrade to my office. So about $125 to purchase the software.
And then you need,
I got a quote of about $1,000 to set it up. Because it has to be set up, it's not,
From who?
It's a relational database that has to be developed.
Well, you have to define the whole thing.
right,
Yeah.
and I would
I'm
need,
aware of that.
I obviously I have to provide reports with all the tables and so on.
And it would be a customized database.
and I've done,
Wait a minute, Max has the point.
Okay, I just think we need to back up a step here because I think that we need to, one, describe what the problem is, and then what possible solutions there are. And the problem is only in changing the number each year and generating the invoice to the property owner. Now, we could very easily accomplish that by just doing a mail merge with the constant numbers already in the letter. And all you'd have to do would be carry forward, just as the name and address, you'd carry forward the balance due to that as part of the letter. And that would not involve any programming or any real expense at all to anybody.
How's that gonna change the number?
Doesn't change anything, gets you the same thing, now you have a bill. Our problem is changing the numbers in Quicken to get the bills out.
Exactly.
There was never a problem in accounting for the money or receiving the
No,
money.
no, no, and yeah, you're right. It's
It never
changing
was.
the numbers.
The problem is generating the report with the correct figures on it for each
Well,
property.
that's not the problem that was articulated that I heard.
The primary
That's
problem
what
is
I
that
hear it
global
is.
change.
It's,
No, it's-
you don't have a global
changing.
change.
Right.
That's
The
right.
problem is changing the number on every one of those records in
Right.
order to do this.
Correct.
Well, you would no longer have to do that if you just generated the mail merge with the amounts for the new year and carried forward the balance from the records in the Quicken.
So you have to touch every account to change the number.
No, you generate it in the letter. The letter, it's gonna say $98 for everybody, no matter who you are, and $50 or $20 depending upon the lot. And that discrimination can come easily with the database. the
So then they're not
address.
going to have an invoice that shows their lots or anything like that, or how each.
Whatever's in Quicken that you can generate out, which should be everything, would just go to the letter, whatever's needed to be in the letter. That's all. All I'm saying is, the problem is changing the number in Quicken every year and generating the invoices. So, one solution to that, I mean, that is the only problem I know of. So the answer to that is simply to do a mail merge against that, which is a simple process to do, and we've done that before. And then you've got your invoices going out to the individual property owners. When they pay, she just clicks it off in her database, just like she always does.
Dan,
But how
It's
does
not in
that,
my database.
wait,
how does that
I
change
mean,
the
the
QuickBook
Dan.
database that says how much is owed? A
Right.
mail merge on a document out here does not change your data in QuickBooks,
Right.
which means your QuickBooks data will not have been changed, so it will be wrong.
But that won't come true until a period passes and they haven't paid. The balance due is
Whether they
whatever it was at
pay
the
or
beginning of the
not,
year.
the data in QuickBooks will be wrong if you don't update it whenever it changes.
Right. What will I post the payment against, Max?
You're gonna post the payment against the property owner's record, just
But-
like you do now.
But it won't have the right
It
number.
won't have the number.
What
in it.
number?
The number in QuickBooks where it records how much is supposed to be there.
Well, she's gonna record a payment of $50.
Well,
But what if
well,
next year it's $55?
Well, next year she
Your
records a
method, she
payment
won't
of
have changed that, she'll only have changed it on the mail merge document.
QuickBook is not looking at billing them for that now,
Well-
we're billing it another way. She's just gonna credit them with $55
if I
next
credit
year.
you with $55, you now have a credit on the account.
Well, you said if you raised it next year to 55, so.
Well, whatever the amount is, if I don't get the numbers into QuickBooks, if I simply export and do a mail merge, and I don't have the numbers that you actually owe on your account, and then you send me a check for $65 or whatever amount, and I post that on your account, you now have a credit on your account. That doesn't make sense to me
The
at all.
debit doesn't exist because she didn't enter it in the data.
So she's got to, you're saying because she didn't put the
She's gonna have
debit
to
in first, which is
manually
what she always
enter
does.
every one in
All right.
QuickBooks. That is the issue,
Yeah.
not producing the bill.
Right.
let me interrupt for a second.
Well, I'm
because
saying, let's identify what the problem is here.
Well, and I think we have, the problem is having to go into QuickBooks.
Now, the problem now is carrying a continuing balance in Quicken without having to change all of those numbers. That's the new problem.
With what you're saying, yes.
Well, that is the problem. I'm just trying to define what is the problem
That
we're
is the
trying to
problem.
do.
It has to be changed.
Because when you go to somebody and say, this is the problem I need to solve with access or whatever, then that's the procedure that they've got to program into
Right.
this whole thing.
Right.
Let me just point out that, and maybe we didn't pick up on it, but in Ria's presentation about this and talking about it, she pointed out that she's been working on it for some time
Right.
and went to several people and several places. I think you went to CAI as well, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I did, CIO.
Went to several
CAI,
different
CAI,
places trying to get
special.
a solution to the problem. And the solution that has been brought forward that she thinks and other people think is the right one is to go to Access.
And other people also being, the accountant today, we met at Toll Griffin, and he agreed with Access being a good option.
It's a good option.
Gary, there's something else I want to mention, I don't know what
Whatever, I'm sorry.
but one of the things implicit in what I said prior to making the motion was that last year, thank goodness, Ria was able to shift her personal time around to a tremendous extent to handle this in the course of doing her regular business. It took a lot of extra time. And we can't count on that happening all the time. And time is money. And I cannot see, once we fully institute this three-step fee change plan, that we shouldn't have a fully automated system that documents everything. I also want to remind you that not every house is $55 mandatory
Well, no,
assessment.
of course, right.
Some of them are 20. So there's a fair amount of detail that Access will handle for us in an automated and transparent way once we move over to it.
Dan?
I was just wondering who is going to do the setup of Access?
I know a young man who, his name is Chris Edmondson, who works with Access all the time, and he has offered to do this. He thinks it will take him between 10 and 12 hours.
And he's gonna be doing that for $1,000, you said?
He's estimating 1,000, which I think is why you're saying 1,500. It also gives us a little bit of leeway if a month down the road, I look at it and say, I wish it could do this.
Right.
Then he can come back in and say, tweak it a little bit.
Can I have the floor for a second? One of the things I used years ago, and I'm sure Access isn't the same anymore, because we're talking probably 15 years ago, was the last time I had anything to do with Access. But when you build a front end, as I remember, it's like a GUI. It's really easy. You just fill in a couple blanks,
Right.
and it does the rest by itself if it's built properly. And I see some value, and no offense, Rhea, but I see value in that where you can go to one place and have it propagate to everything as required in case Rhea becomes ill
Right.
or finds another job and we have to train somebody else to do the job. I've seen some value in that in terms of if there's a transition of some sort. And that's all I'll say.
Well, we need a definite statement of work of what it is he's gonna accomplish, so we can find out if that's what we got with it. Because tracking a balance, tracking individual payments and deposit amounts and all that stuff, gonna be a lot more complicated than I think what you're all thinking
Are
of.
you suggesting an amendment to the motion?
I don't know that it requires an amendment to the motion, but
Okay.
we should specify, just like when we do on a bid,
Obviously, we should
we have
have
specs and things, so we need a statement that describes what it is we want it to do
Right.
for whatever period of time you want to develop here.
You can't argue with that. Dan?
Okay, I guess I had two things, but not eluded me, but are we certain that it was 1,100 that you said for the motion?
1,500.
1,500.
It covers the 1,100 and it's up to 1,500.
Okay, so we know we have sufficient funds. Now, what budget line item can that be applied
See, well,
to?
you hit the nail on it. There is no budget line item. We can still authorize the expenditure though, and it would go to, the expenditure would be posted against the correct line item, and it would be a cost overrun, which is the way we need to be doing it anyway, because when we go to re-budget, we'll know where we spent money properly instead of taking money from some other line item.
Now, this,
So, can we afford to do it? Yes. Do
Well,
we have
I'm
a line item
just
for it?
thinking in
No.
terms of that requirement of 15% limit for over expenditures.
Yes, but that
Or
only,
whatever we
it
have in
would
the
all come out of
budget.
admin, and the 15% is to the roll-up of the admin account.
so it would not exceed the admin 15%.
So I asked the question mainly to make sure that we had thought about that and we knew exactly how we were
Right.
accomplishing that piece of it.
Right.
Larry?
When we do a deposit ticket, do we put the last name and then the amount on each individual one when you take it to the
On a
bank?
deposit ticket? No. No.
I mean, that would
That's
be a
not what the
great
bank
way.
wants anymore. That's not what the bank wants anymore. You mean you want me to,
Just their last name and the amount, on your long ticket, so you
you're
have.
talking 65 entries on one
I mean, and if
deposit.
we have to hire someone else to come in and help you,
You don't have to hire
No,
anybody
this
else
is
to
just-
help me,
listen.
Larry.
No,
just, if something happens to you, you should die, you should leave, you
But
should go
that, but it
someplace.
would all be tracked in the access.
It's
All
That's
tracked
what-
in access,
that's
it's
why-
right there.
Well, I'm saying, what we did at the store, we had a last name and the amount, and that's a double check, because and if she missed somebody or something was wrong, it was just the last name and
I
Okay,
can certainly
well,
do
it
that.
certainly can be written
I
up,
can
but
do that.
I take it to the bank wouldn't have much useful
The bank
purpose.
doesn't want it.
well,
Because
they
they're
take
just-
it, and then you'd have a record of it.
They don't
Well-
want it, they will not take it, is what I'm saying.
No, they
Oh,
don't
our
want
bank
it.
won't. Huh,
The
interesting.
statement of work
That way.
has to include a requirement for deposits and deposit tracking. Individual deposits, which
Right.
if you do 80 of those a year, it doesn't matter, that's how many it's gotta do.
Right.
So whatever is in access,
Tracking
the
deposits.
problem is gonna be generating all of the reports that are required, the database is simple. But getting it to relate all those things and then generate these lists, because you're going, just like you do a reconciling your checking account, you're gonna have to have a reconcile piece of paper report for every deposit that shows that
But I mean,
Access has this money in it, that you checked it off in that thing, and you're making a deposit for that amount of money, which then should show up when you do your reconcile on your bank. That slip should go with it saying that, you know, you did not, just a bank slip. but the
rather
one
than
that's-
just
And
sitting
that
there.
one would have basically all the
Report
names on
access.
it.
Oh, would it?
It would have all the names of property
Yes,
owners.
and that's the
To
thing,
match.
rather than writing each one
Okay,
on
that's
the
fair
deposit
enough.
slip, it's a
Your point's well
report from
taken.
Access, not an individual name writing down on a deposit
Well,
slip.
I think by the time we do generate the statement of work, it's gonna be a lot more than $1,000.
How much an hour does he get?
Well, I guess it would be about $100 an hour,
Is that what he gets, $100 an hour?
10 to 12 hours, he thought, $1,000,
So somewhere in that
So
neighborhood.
you're doing it as a task job, not as a per hour job.
Right.
as a task.
Right, right.
Call the question?
Okay, so we have a call for the question. All those in favor of approving the motion to approve $1,500 to move forward with the access database? And I think I would say that we will make sure we have a good statement of work.
Right.
with it. Say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion passes. Okay.
That's my report.
If that is your report,
That's unfinished.
next.
That would be long.
That's the right phrase.
All right, we're going round table and we'll start with Larry today.
I don't have anything.
Nothing?
I'm gonna be gone next month.
All month? Where you going?
Mexico.
All right, yes. Where it's warm and
Yes.
the tequila is free.
Cerveza.
Max,
Yeah, I have nothing, but I'll be gone the next 3 weeks also,
okay, where are you going?
Florida.
Florida.
A little bit of golf.
Good.
Nah, I'm gonna play golf. I gotta find my brother.
You don't know where it is?
I
You've
haven't
lost
heard
it?
from him for 2 years.
Well, good, I hope you're successful.
I gotta find him.
Fran?
I'm not going to Florida and I'm staying home and I have a lot of work to do. That's it.
Okay, well, good, so you'll be here.
Yep.
I will be taking off 2 weeks myself, the last week of February, January, the first week of February. So we need to think about when we're gonna have a meeting next month, and I'll plant that seed now. Or you can have it without me, but I will be gone the first week of February. I'm only going to Hilton Head, so.
Nothing to report.
Nothing.
You're not going to
I will
Italy?
be in New York the
You're not
first
going to Italy?
and second
No.
weeks of February.
Upward
Not
snows
that I
continue.
really want to be in Oswego at that
Oh
time
my
of
God.
year, but I will be doing the procurement audit up there. And then I'll be here the third week, and then I will be in mid-Virginia the fourth week, and then back up in New York the first week of March.
So you're practicing for the cold weather this week
You'll
here.
be gone the first and second week of February. That's two of us that won't be here for the meeting. You won't be here either.
No, I'm gonna be gone from the 20th of January till the 17th of February.
Okay, and Max, are you gonna be going too?
No, I'll be here in February.
Okay,
Do you know your dates that you're going?
so,
on?
well, we need to think
The
next
next 3
time.
weeks.
So
Starting
possibly
Through the
the
22nd.
third week of
I
February.
think the third
I
week's
just like to
gonna
get
work
into my
better.
outlook, so I have.
Well, you could, actually, I could be by phone too.
So
And
how-
We go
How about,
to Buffalo.
No.
Aubrey, do
the
you have anything?
Eastern end of Lake Ontario, where all the snow falls, because the
Oh,
wind blows
God.
that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Kurt, how about you?
We'll be gone from about February 10th to mid-March.
So you'll be gone the second
Wow.
week.
You better send out an email and get everybody's.
Yeah.
I think that's a better idea. Thank you,
Good
Max. That's a
idea.
good idea. Let's,
I'll
we'll
send
we'll
it.
have
Set yourself up a
Rhea will
chart.
send out a email and we'll try to figure out when the best time. I mean, it might be the third week of February. I don't know.
Yep, we lost somebody.
Aubrey.
Can we call it
It's
There,
You'll just go back if you know.
we probably have to hold some committee meetings during those periods too, so you better actually ask all committee members when they're gonna be available also.
For all committees?
Well, when we get,
All the committees you plan to hold meetings for.
yeah, when I get finished with my road report, we may decide we're gonna wait for that, so be the end of February, I think. Okay, thank you, everybody. Gosh, that's not, or it is winter. Yes, that's right. Okay, committee reports, action items. Jeff is not here, but Jeff and I had a complaint from the last board general meeting from a
Hey,
property
Aubrey, it's
owner
Rita. We
at
got cut off there. Okay, just sit tight.
329 Overlook, which is on the lower section of Overlook, down by Lake Vista, about a drainage issue.
Are you signing off then?
And so Jeff and I met and reviewed the issue. Jeff has rendered an opinion in writing, and we will be covering that with a letter from the office to the property owner. But unfortunately, the issue that the property owner has is primarily due to the lay of his lot, not runoff from our right-of-way, which might help to, if we could do something, would only have about a 5% impact on this problem. So that it's not, turns out it's not us, but anyway, just to let you know. So Jeff has been around. Jeff is working on putting together, formalizing all of the projects that he thinks we should be doing this spring. And in the last meeting that the Roads Committee had with him, I'll just roll this into the Roads Committee report. And I think I told you all this last time. He's come up with about $150,000, rough numbers, of work for next spring, next year. We don't have that much money. So after he gets all of his projects fleshed out, we're gonna have to do some picking and choosing on what we're gonna work on. The Roads Committee will make that recommendation and
Is
bring
he
it
going to
forward.
try to prioritize them on greatest needs and such?
He's gonna prioritize, and then the Roads Committee will work with him to perhaps reprioritize or just take his recommendation. Okay, on the Roads Committee, it's come to our attention that the footpath on Surf Road, there's a little wooden bridge that goes over that little stream that runs out into the bay. Does anybody know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think I did some repair on it
Well,
2 years ago.
it's rotten.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you
And
were looking at it.
I did some repair.
yeah, there's a couple of boards that are rotten, and I did not make them go through, but soon they're going to. So the question is, do you want to take a look at that, or?
Yeah, I will.
Well, let me suggest that you consider doing something to raise that
What do you think?
up off the water, because when that backs up, which it does, before it flushes itself, there's not much you can do about it because of all the phragmites in there, but it does flush itself, but it'll back up, and that water basically submerges the bridge when it does that.
Well, that whole area submerges with any kind of high water,
So, just a
including
thought.
the approaches.
Is there only one bridge we have? Am I going to the right one? Or is-
There's only one. It's also come to my attention that not immediately, I don't have it on here, everybody aware at the foot of Bay view, there's a walkway that goes down, or stairway that goes down to that little,
Yep,
The foot of what?
and we just had that replaced about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
And when it was replaced, I pitched a fit because the guy did not even use ground contact pressure treated.
Oh,
And it's right there on the water. Well, it's about shot already too, but I think it'll go maybe another year. And I don't want to spend money on it this year, but
Okay.
something,
where is it at the foot of?
where Bayview hits Bay.
Stairways.
Okay.
There's
There's
an
an empty lot
empty
there.
lot there, but that's an access point to get down to the bay.
Okay.
And so we have right-of-way access along the edge of that lot to that wooden staircase to get down to the sand.
I'll take a look at that too.
you'll notice that it's got all kinds of things. When we put it in, the county went nuts with the requirements on what had to be on it.
Yeah.
So it's got special handrails and all this, it's a mess. Anyway, I bet if they knew about the footpath bridge, they'd have to do something there too.
No, don't tell them.
We won't tell them.
We recorded.
Okay, and we, actually, Rhian and I have been talking about this for actually more than a year at least. We have at least 2 places in our neighborhood where beach access is available. There's, well, actually more than 2. One of them is the stairs. There's one down at the foot of Riverview Terrace. And there's one at Surf, where the road has washed out. We think it might be a good idea to get some signs that say community beach access here with an arrow, so that people would know that it's there. And I'm not sure I want to even make a motion about it. I'd just like to float the idea and get people thinking about it. I think it would probably cost us about $150 to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it would be very much. So, some sort of tasteful sign.
And the reason I don't want to make a motion about it, because we've talked about this before, and some members of the community don't want to advertise that there is beach access.
Right.
They don't want parking, they
They
don't
want
want
private
anything down
property,
there.
that's
They
what
do.
they
I
want.
wonder if somebody gets
I just
hurt
want to
after
think
we
about
put the sign up and somebody uses it that doesn't belong.
Well,
we have that anywhere.
I know, but I mean, then we'd be encouraging
Well,
it.
the sign said DPPO residents only beach access. Then if a non-resident used it and got hurt, they're trespassing.
We're okay.
Right, good idea.
Well, we could certainly craft a sign to match like that. I'm just bringing up to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Let's all
recall,
think about that for a minute, and talk to your spouses and significant others,
yeah,
and see what you think.
I recall that we had discussed this a number of years ago.
We did.
And because there's other access points in other places in
Yes,
the
there are
community
more.
as well.
Yeah, but they're not all that readily accessed. I'll give you a good point. It's down the end of Leeson's Cove. There's access there to Mill Creek, but try to get to it. I mean, the road ends there, but first of all, there's an embankment going down, A. B, it's so full of leaves and
Leaves and
debris, you couldn't
mud.
get through it if you had to.
yeah,
And there's areas like that all over the
Yeah.
community,
yeah.
Well, we tried to improve that years ago, but
property owners there.
how can I say, whatever population that was involved, board members, committee members, property owners, they all nixed that idea, so. Generally, the community doesn't want any access to anybody anywhere.
I'm not looking to
Common
develop new
feeling.
access, just point out that there is access where it
There's
exists,
access
that's
where it
all.
exists, that's right.
Okay,
And if I
I
could
think
just
it's a
say,
good idea, and if you do it, it might take some pressure off of the place in front of my house that the community thinks is their access point, and it isn't.
yeah, I'm not sure
Either
we want
that,
to
or
put a
maybe
sign
I
there.
can put up a sign that says, this is not a community access point.
Private property, trespassers will be shot.
Right.
Well, anybody can walk off that road onto the beach there, so it
And
is a
in
community
fact, it is.
access point.
Like it or not, it is.
Which part are you talking about?
We don't need to put a sign.
So that whole area
Make
where
a
the
big deal.
causeway is on
right
What's
next,
the name
right
of
in
the
front
road?
of
Lake
Amy's
Road.
house.
Bay Drive.
Lake Drive.
They
Once it
used
goes
to-
down past her house, that whole area all the way to the other end is probably.
Well, the causeway is, but they use
Well, it's
my
not very
house.
friendly because most of it's rock.
Right.
Right,
Hasn't stopped them.
Bree, you
I
had something?
just wanted to say, I think that this is coming up again, because, you know, we have a lot of people, new people coming into the community, and they come in here and they get a map, and here's the community beach, here's the boat ramp. Well, there's all this beach, or, you know, can I get on the beach anyplace else? So, well, yes. So I think the old timers, all of us who have lived here a long time, know where these places are, but it just seems like a nice little.
And I'm not looking
sign.
for a flashing sign that says, hey, come look at
No,
me.
no, just some
Just
nice
something
little
that sits
street
back off the
sign.
road that you'd be
Yeah.
able to find it in.
Right.
And the reason, if we were to do that, one of the reasons is, some places, the adjoining property owners are not very friendly to people walking on the
No,
beach.
they're not.
So if people are gonna go down there and get on the beach, they need to know where to go without trespassing on other people's property.
yeah, I'm in favor of having those signs in various places. There's some kind of something built into the American East Coast character, but DC closed the ramp from Klingle Road to Rock Creek Parkway for repairs once. And they didn't finish the repairs quickly. And then a big campaign appeared, and hundreds of neighbors put signs on their front lawn that said, "Don't destroy Klingle Road Park." They now think of that ramp as their own, and at rush hour, it's horrendous getting in for regular commuters because they don't have as many places to get in. And that's what happens if you don't have signage. People start thinking, and isn't it one of those places that you met, was it River Terrace? It's
River
off
Terrace.
of, it's onto
It's
the
all
river.
over.
It's
Where
off the river, it
somebody
goes right
thinks
down
he
the river.
owns it. We
Yeah.
went through some
Yeah, we had-
fights with
They
him.
had to set him straight on that.
So, I
Okay.
don't see any problem with putting some signs up.
Okay, that's fine, we'll bring it back, I'm gonna
Alright.
bring it back. This should have been a comma here, this is really two things. It's beach access and as into our beach, and access marking. So we just talked about access marking. Beach access has become an issue because we don't have enough volunteers to go down there and open the gate and close it. Oh, that's another line item? Okay, well, let's wait till we get to the other line item then, now that I've planted that seed. Okay, that's all I have,
Maybe
finance.
people will be inspired when it gets warmer to help out.
No, that's not helping us now. Finance, Amy? Anything?
What are we,
Committee report?
Oh. You have your January profit and loss statement, and there hasn't been a lot of movement there. It's pretty much like what we talked about at the last board meeting. The big ticket item, which, because it's winter, we're just not doing a lot of outside work, or any outside work, except what we mentioned at the last meeting and the community meeting, which is that Carl Bowen is almost done with his 3-year cleanup, bush hogging and tree trimming of our rights of way. Gary sent a note around to all of us
On
that.
the roads committee.
Oh, was it on
Just
the
the roads
roads? Oh, okay. You've marked a few places that Carl has to get back to, and there's one place he hasn't, one small place he hasn't finished, that's wherever that is. So very soon, he'll be done, and you'll see about $10,000 expenses.
16.
How much?
16.
16,
I
all right,
believe
you
that's
mentioned 10, I had remembered something more like 16.
16.
But it hasn't happened yet, because it's not quite done. So that's the only big expenditure. And your balance sheet is gonna continue to be wonky until the end of the fiscal year, because when you do adjust the way QuickBooks is handling things and the reports are generated, it has to be consistent with, auditing changes, so we don't wanna make any changes now. So that's it.
Another question on that, on the balance sheet, we're still not showing the county held funds in there?
We are,
No, you're not,
we are.
zero.
We are. Andrew had me take them from current asset. He said they are not an asset, they are a receivable. So that 219,950, if I show the expanded balance sheet, consists of approximately, off the top of my head, 170 or so thousand for county held STD funds. Then the balance of that is what people owe us for DPPOA
Right.
association dues and so on. It is there, Max, that's
So
where
the
you
balance
put-
is 219,000
The balance,
at
if
the
you.
county.
No. That
No,
that
it's
number
both.
consists of county held, which is approximately 170,000, that's off the top of my head. The rest of it is, well, some credits I've given for bankruptcies where you have to credit the account, and then the fees that people still owe us for covenant fees and
For last year.
mandatory assessments. Right.
I just want to point out that we have discussed this at every previous board meeting since this format has been coming out, this particular accounts receivable. So it just shifts a little bit, but the content is basically the same.
Okay, the other question I have is you're down under liabilities, you're still showing deferred revenue from the last fiscal year down there. I wonder why that hasn't been moved.
That's actually just now been put there, and the reason I can't move it now, first of all, is because they've tied off our books for the end of the fiscal year. What they had me do at the end of the fiscal year was to create adjusting journal entries, one of which was to carry forth, and I think this is a mistake on their part, carry forth to deferred revenue the amount that was in the STD general operating checking account, which is as of June 30th was $17,700. I think he misunderstood me when I said to him, we need to show deferred revenue for DPPOA funds, not STD. This is the adjusting journal entry he had me make.
Yeah, because as of July the 1st every year, there are no deferred funds.
Well, he's
It
not.
cannot be because everything was due and payable
Correct.
and is applicable to the next fiscal
he's-
year.
He is telling me not to do, you know how we always zero it out on June 30th and write
Yeah.
back on the
Can we
1st?
move the money
He
over?
said, that's not necessary, that's not what we should be doing, because that puts it on the profit and loss, and he said it does not belong on the profit and loss. He is showing me how to do deferred revenue to the upcoming fiscal year. For this year, we're gonna kind of leave it alone, because we're already 6 months through the fiscal year.
Right.
So that's why Amy is saying some wonky numbers. These are the wonky numbers that she's talking about.
Right, which we
He's saying
talked
just hold
about
off
at every
until-
meeting.
He's saying just hold off until July 1, you know, and then we'll start doing it the way, according to GAAP. What was that?
However,
Generally accepted.
However
Thank
they
you.
want to do it
Generally,
now.
exactly, exactly.
Right.
The other one that you may have noticed is this 3250 accounts payable STD under a current liability. That is actually a budget line item for a contingency amount of 3250. I believe that Andrew mistook that as some sort of a reserve and had us put it into a liability account.
Right, and it's not anything.
And it's not, it's just a budget line item.
Well, they should probably straighten those things out
I
before the end of the fiscal year.
No, I talked to him today and we talked about it and we said, no, for now, it's really not that big of amount of money.
Just
Money
leave it.
goes to just leave it.
So it's gonna go on for the rest of the year.
Yeah, yeah. So those are the wonky numbers. And also the association dues decline. That will stay there until the end of the year as well.
Wait, well, that's a previous thing.
It's a
I'm
previous thing.
Surprised we,
It's-
why didn't you just get rid of that
Declined by
already?
that much.
That's,
No.
that's from years
Oh,
ago for
okay.
the people who chose not to join the association.
May
It's
I
no longer
interject
applicable.
at this point, because we have this conversation at every board meeting, and the important thing for you to focus on is the profit and loss sheet. And this type of question, if you still need clarification on it after 6 months, I advise you to work directly with me or Rhea offline, because we have been going over this many times.
Okay, you done, Amy?
Yeah,
Do you have anything for the environmental committee?
last meeting, I announced that the environmental committee was going to meet soon. And I'm not sure what happened. I don't know whether my husband's health got suddenly worse or
Well,
somebody else got sick or
There's
something.
A lot of people have been ill, so.
So, I just can't remember, but I'm tooling up. So when you send your email out to find out about people's whereabouts, if you would include the environmental committee, that would be helpful. And, you know, along with the board, or do it separately so it's not confusing.
Okay. I'll do a separate one, I think.
I know about the next 45 days.
So thank you very much.
Okay, and no report from the planning committee because there's been no meetings. There's been no meeting of the safety committee. Is there any new information from the safety committee, Mr. Holt?
I'd like to make a report.
Certainly, you have the floor.
The safety committee really does three things. It's concerned about safety in the community. It is also concerned about the security of the community. And it also is geared up, as it originally was, for emergency damage assessment, which is the new limited role that we have to do. So it's a complex, overlapping function. Gary has volunteered and was voted in as the head of the board
Liaison.
to represent the safety committee. We have not had a reason to meet as a committee as a whole yet. However, I have communicated at times. Now, the other thing it does is that it runs the Community Emergency Service Center, which has two functions. One, to pre-position first aid and stretchers, and to appreciate the fact that as this winter comes on, at any time there can be heat, electricity, communication, and a place to meet in the event we have some sort of emergency. And I can't overstate how much confidence that gives me, because otherwise we would